Tonight, remain in Mexico no more. The Supreme Court upholds President Biden's proposed policy to terminate a Trump-era rule forcing asylum seekers to wait in Mexico. This as a new justice makes Supreme Court history.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
Ketanji Brown Jackson becomes the first black woman to ascend to the highest court in the land. Plus, summer bummer.
We don't know what to do because the prices are increasing every single day.
Record high inflation could send an uncertain economy into a July 4th tailspin. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. The final two high court decisions of the term handing the Biden administration both a win and a loss. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
In Washington, I'm Caitlin Burke. That win coming in a case dealing with immigration. The Supreme Court ruling the Biden administration can end the Remain in Mexico policy put in place by former President Donald Trump.
The policy allowed the United States to send migrants back to Mexico while they waited for their asylum cases to play out. CBN's Matt Galka is at the court tonight. Matt, in a term with several key rulings showcasing the new conservative supermajority on the court, today's opinion had a slightly unusual makeup of justices.
Yeah, guys, it certainly might have been surprising to some, with Brett Kavanaugh joining all of the liberal justices and Chief Justice John Roberts in this 5-4 opinion. Now, this is a policy that the Biden administration has been looking to end since day one. Former President Trump put the Remain in Mexico policy in place so that asylum seekers, mostly from Central America, would have to wait in Mexico while asylum claims here in the U.S. played out in the court system. In terms of the policy, lower courts said it had to remain in place based on the belief that Homeland Security could not detain everyone seeking asylum, so they would have to be denied entry. But Chief Justice John Roberts wrote, quote, "The problem is the statute doesn't say anything like that," in his opinion, where he seemed to emphasize the flexibility that an administration had. He also said the policy is, quote, "discretionary and remains discretionary." So really focusing on the flexibility in that majority opinion.
Matt, 4 conservative judges dissented. What was their basis?
Well, it seemed to be the sheer amount of people who come to the border seeking asylum and the lack of resources that we have to detain or help or send away all of these people. Justice Samuel Alito wrote in his dissent that Homeland Security might now, quote, "simply release into this country untold numbers of aliens who are very likely to be removed if they show up for their removal hearings. This practice violates the clear terms of the law, but the court looks the other way." Now, it should be noted that this policy was separate from Title 42, the public health emergency policy put into place that allows migrants to be sent back to Mexico because of the pandemic. That is still in place, guys.
All right, an important distinction there. Thank you so much, Matt Galka at the Supreme Court. Well, David Beer is the Associate Director of Immigration Studies at the Cato Institute and an expert on legal immigration and border security. David, welcome. David, how quickly do you think we will see this Remain in Mexico policy lifted, and what does that mean for the already complicated, complex situation at the border?
Look, I think that it's going to be over a period of a few weeks to months where you have the people who are already enrolled in the program being let pursue their claims in the United States, which was initially the policy that was in effect when President Biden first assumed office. But in terms of the broader situation, the vast majority of the people who are being sent back to Mexico are being sent back under the CDC, Centers for Disease Control's authority under Title 42, not under Remain in Mexico. And so this policy, even under the Trump administration at the end of 2020, early 2021, before President Biden rescinded it, was not using Remain in Mexico primarily. The vast majority of people at that time and ever since have been sent back to Mexico under this alternative authority. So it's not going to have any kind of game-changing effect on the situation on the ground. The one note I would say on that is it could be misinterpreted by some migrants that the Title 42 authority is also gone. And that could lead some more people to try to enter the United States.
Assuming there is an influx of migrants coming through the border now, do you believe the Biden administration is prepared to deal with that?
Oh, I don't think so. I mean, already, for the last more than a year, we've seen increasing numbers of apprehensions, a much more diverse set of demographics than we've ever seen before at the border. And so the administration has really not come out with any kind of policy that would change the situation dramatically. It's all been very marginal, very small scale responses to what is really a historic situation.
David, this ruling comes the same week more than 50 migrants were found dead, packed inside a truck crossing the southern border in Texas. Regardless of where you stand on the issue, what changes can be made to immigration policies to prevent tragedies like that from ever happening again?
Look, as long as the border is heavily patrolled by Border Patrol and restricted and legal entry is prevented, we're going to continue to see these types of tragedies. This is not the first time that we've seen mass casualty events at the border. Hundreds of people die crossing the border every year from dehydration or drowning. And so the response should be that we need to have legal pathways for people who are trying to come to the United States to pursue peaceful and productive goals. We have more than 11 million job openings in this country, and plenty of people who want to fill those jobs in other countries. And a more humane policy would be one where we have people coming in an orderly, legal manner.
All right, David Bier, Associate Director of Immigration Studies at the Cato Institute. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. Well, in a major blow to the Biden administration and Obama-era climate change policies, the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 to limit the Environmental Protection Agency's ability to regulate power plant greenhouse gas emissions. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote the majority opinion for West Virginia versus EPA, which states Congress did not grant EPA the authority to devise emissions caps based on the generation shifting approach the agency took in the Clean Power Plan. In her dissent, Justice Kagan makes the case Congress did give the EPA the power in the Clean Air Act, stating Congress charged EPA with addressing those potentially catastrophic harms, including through regulation of fossil fuel-fired power plants. The majority ruled Congress needs to make a clear law, otherwise states will deal with regulating individual plants. Well, one thing has become clear this historic term as it comes to an end. The conservative-leaning court handed down major victories affirming religious freedom. 4 cases before the court dealt with religious liberty issues, including Kennedy versus Bremerton School District, in which the court ruled a former high school football coach has a constitutional right to pray on the field after games. In Carson v. Macon, the justices ruled the state of Maine cannot exclude religious schools from a state-funded tuition program. And in earlier rulings this year, the court said the city of Boston violated the First Amendment for refusing to fly a Christian flag outside City Hall while allowing other groups to use the flagpole to promote their causes. And the court ruled in favor of a Texas death row inmate who requested his pastor be able to lay hands on him and pray aloud at his execution.
With us now is Tony Perkins, president of Family Research Council. Tony, thanks for being here. The court this term delivered major protections for religious freedom. At the same time, polling shows confidence in the Supreme Court has sunk to all-time lows. How do you think evangelicals rate the court after some of these key opinions?
Well, Caitlin, I think what we see here now is we see a court returning to the Constitution and ruling in alignment with the written document of the Constitution. And I actually think what we're seeing is evangelicals, social conservatives, Catholics, those that have been involved in the political process for the last 40 years, trying to elect people who are pro-life, who are constitutionalist, we see the fruit of that. We are now at a point where we have a court that has returned to the actual Constitution instead of creating things out of thin air. Now, obviously, there are some people that are not happy with that. When you look at the left, it has leaned on the court to do their political policy for decades. But now, I think what you've even had the president saying this earlier this week, or actually last Friday, saying that Roe will be on the ballot in the fall. So I think finally the left is realizing they're going to have to go to work and affect elections if they want to pass their policy initiatives.
Tony, speaking of Roe, President Biden took his support for Roe, making Roe the law of the land actually up a notch. I want you to take a listen, and we'll get your thoughts on the other end of the soundbite.
I believe we have to codify Roe v. Wade in the law, and the way to do that is to make sure the Congress votes to do that. And if the filibuster gets in the way, it's like voting rights. It should be, we provide an exception for this, require an exception to the filibuster for this action to deal with the Supreme Court decision.
And Tony, as you hinted earlier, for anyone who thought last week's decision overturning Roe was final, that's clearly not the case, is it?
No, and John, two thoughts on that. Number one, the president's admission that they have to codify it means that for 49 years, this hasn't been the law. It's been a court ruling. The court created abortion. They created this right. You know, what the court creates, the court can take away. And so the president there, once again, not wanting to go through the full length of the process of going out, convincing people that this is what we need to do. You need to elect people who support your view that we need to abort babies up to the moment of birth. That's not what he's doing. He's saying we need to short circuit the system. We need to eliminate the filibuster for this one thing. Not everything, but for this one thing. But John, here's the reality. If they change the filibuster on this, as they were trying to do on voting rights, when the Republicans are in the majority, they can do the same thing. And then what you have is basically a tennis match, back and forth after each election. There, you talk about destabilizing, as the president called the court decision. That would be destabilizing to our entire country.
Switching gears quickly, FRC released a report today at the International Religious Freedom Summit in Washington. It looks at growing intolerance toward Christians, but not where most people would think. You described the report as a warning call. Can you quickly explain?
I can, Caitlin. As the former chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, I've been shocked in the last 2 years, especially in the wake of COVID, the increasing authoritarianism that we're seeing from Western governments. And here's the bottom line of our report, is that as we understand the value of promoting international religious freedom, we cannot promote abroad what we don't protect here at home. And so we've got to focus on protecting religious freedom. That's not just the freedom to believe, but to live according to those beliefs as well.
All right, Tony, we are unfortunately out of time. Hopefully we'll get the chance to talk to you more about that report later. Tony Perkins with the Family Research Council, thanks for being with us tonight.
Absolutely.
After 27 years on the bench, Justice Stephen Breyer officially retires today, replacing him his former law clerk and the first black woman to serve on the Supreme Court, Ketanji Brown Jackson.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Jackson was surrounded by family as Chief Justice John Roberts administered the constitutional oath. Then former Justice Breyer administered the judicial oath. Not only is Jackson making history as the first black woman on the high court, it's also the first time 4 female justices will serve together.
Hot weather and high prices. When we come back, how inflation might hit your wallet even harder this summer.
A key Commerce Department inflation report is out today showing inflation remains high. All indications pointing to this summer being the most expensive in decades.
That's right. As Brody Carter reports, some analysts worry the 4th of July holiday could be the catalyst that sends this economy into a tailspin.
On Independence Day, we celebrate the country's break from England in 1776 to gain freedom. Surging prices and tightening budgets, however, are making financial freedom in 2022 more difficult.
We don't know what to do because the prices are increasing every single day.
I just think the gas prices are ridiculous.
People are feeling these pinches. If you're renting, 25% increases. If you're buying a home, you're seeing a 60% increase. And the official government numbers are saying, no, you're just seeing a 6% increase year over year. But families realize it's far, far worse than that.
In keeping track of your budget, you've no doubt noticed the impact of higher prices. That reality is spreading as consumer sentiment sits at its lowest point since researchers started tracking that feeling in 1952. Joel Griffith with the Heritage Foundation.
Regardless of whether we end up in technically a recession, the bottom line is that for the majority of American families, they're experiencing a real decline in their standard of living.
There are three holidays, there are three moments when Americans take to the roads and when Americans buy more food than at any other time of the year: Christmas, Thanksgiving, and the 4th of July weekend.
Pollster and political consultant Frank Luntz warning Americans that July 4th demand for gas, food, and travel could set off inflation fireworks.
The Biden administration is afraid of the political impact, so they're downplaying the personal impact. And the truth is they should be candid.
The government's measure for inflation, the Consumer Price Index, shows average prices rose 8.6% over last year. A daily reminder of that pain coming at the pump, with gas roughly $5 a gallon. Some states averaging well over that.
And if you're a family with multiple children, you add on that travel cost along with the food cost and lodging too. A lot of hotels are up 20-something% year over year. And I hope that families aren't going to risk going into even deeper debt to fund a holiday weekend. In times of uncertainty, it's good to act fiscally responsible.
And when the music fades and everyone heads home, many Americans will likely face a harsh reality.
And the typical family, a middle-class family, is seeing close to a $3,000 pay cut over the past year or so because inflation is outpacing wage growth. We're going to see the impacts from the massive government spending on the inflation front. We're going to see that for years to come.
The Federal Reserve faces an audacious goal to try and tame surging costs. And Federal Chairman Jerome Powell acknowledges if interest rates go too high too fast, we could be headed towards a recession. Brody Carter, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Brody. Joining us now is Mark Hamrick, Senior Economic Analyst and Washington Bureau Chief at Bankrate. Mark, it's always great to have you. You know, it feels like we're in a perfect storm scenario for economic collapse. High inflation, rising interest rates, and unpredictable markets. So, Mark, as the title of a recent Bankrate article says, are we in a recession, or does it just feel that way to many Americans?
Economic collapse is a little severe there, John and Caitlin. I think what some of the earlier sound bites pointed to is that inflation is miserable enough. We don't really have to be in a recession for people to feel miserable because they're already feeling that way. We just did complete, I will give you a little bit of a news alert here. We just completed an economist survey at Bankrate, and we basically have the economists saying that there's a 50-50 chance of a recession in the next 12 to 18 months. Now, that's not 100%. It doesn't mean that it has already started. It could have, but we just don't know that. And at the end of the day, it could be a short and shallow recession if we have one, which would be a lot different than the 14.7% unemployment rate we had at the beginning of the pandemic, as well as the 10% unemployment rate after the great financial crisis. Obviously, what we also heard, there was a lot of political finger pointing. The reality is that there's been a convergence of unprecedented factors that have all created and led to this situation that, as you note, is the worst in decades, and it's going to take a while to get out of this.
In Brody's piece a moment ago, we heard from Frank Luntz, and he warned that the holiday demand could make inflation worse. Do you agree?
No, I don't. It's, that suggests that it needs to get, into a different position to be bad. We already have consumers saying that essentially they're as downbeat as they've been in decades. And the reality is, I think, I respect Frank. He knows a lot about politics. The reality is that once we get past this period, I think consumers are going to be pulling back further, not able to spend on as many things as they would like. And we've already begun to see some of that. And so the reality is that if demand begins to wither, you will see that reflected in prices. So we may have seen the peak of inflation. We're not ready to sort of spike that football yet. We need to see it in the data, but we are seeing gasoline prices come off. We're seeing other commodities prices come off as well.
Mark, in the last few seconds we have, the Labor Department, of course, as you know, released the latest unemployment numbers today. They show very little change. What does that suggest to you about the job market?
It means, John, that we're not seeing the layoffs that we know that are happening out there sort of tilt the economy in a downward fashion. But we will be getting the June employment or unemployment report out in about a week. We'll be watching that closely. Right now, the expectation is the jobless rate remains steady at 3.6%.
All right, if it's Thursday, we can always count on Mark to bring us great insights. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
As Russia's war in Ukraine drags on into its 5th month, how the United States is vowing to provide more help. Next on Faith Nation.
The United States is pledging another $800 million to Ukraine's fight against the Russian invasion.
In a final press conference at the NATO summit today, President Biden said the new round of aid will include advanced air defense systems, counter-battery radars, and additional ammunition for high-mobility artillery rocket systems.
We're supplying them with the capacity and the overwhelming courage they've demonstrated that, in fact, they can continue to resist the Russian aggression. And so I don't know how it's going to end, but it will not end with a Russian defeat of Ukraine.
The new promise of aid comes as Russia today pulled back from Snake Island, a small but strategic piece of land in the Black Sea. Ukraine says Russia evacuated the area after Ukrainian attacks, although Russia claimed it left the island after a successful operation there.
Still ahead, the act of kindness that brought these two strangers together. Next.
Finally tonight, a Good Samaritan's act of kindness is coming full circle.
Eliana Martin left her purse filled with cash and credit cards in a grocery store cart. Thankfully, the bag was found by Adrian Rodriguez. Instead of taking advantage, the thoughtful teen decided to track the owner down and return the bag. A doorbell cam caught the moment. Martin was so touched by the act of kindness, she decided to give back. She started a GoFundMe to raise money to thank the teen for his good deed.
Who says there aren't good people, trustworthy people in the world today?
I know. You know, these Ring doorbell videos are providing the world with a lot of really good content.
Good resources there, yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for watching this edition of Faith Nation.
We'll see you tomorrow.